Hey, this is Efrem Smith. Welcome to another episode of City Beats. What? Here we are, back at it again. We talk about what's urban, and we also mix in some faith. I'm a pastor, so we're going to talk a little church, we're going to talk a little faith, but we're going to talk about stuff that's urban. And when it comes to talking stuff that's urban, I have next to me Zoro. Zoro, he knows about the soul music. He knows about urban music. He's played with Earth, Wind, and Fire. He's played with Bobby Brown. He's played with Lenny Kravitz, who brings soul and rock together in a way that it's Prince-like. Mm-hmm. And so I'm talking to a guy who knows the urban sound, that knows the beat of the city, but he also knows who has turned his heartbeat around, and that's his relationship with God. And we're going to get to that too. But thank you for being on this show with me.
It's my honor, brother. My honor to be here. It's a pleasure.
So let's just start with, because I am such. If there's any such thing as a soul music geek, it's me. I mean, I grew up. I can still remember getting up on Saturday mornings, and my younger brother Tremaine and I would have chores, and my dad would then say, after you do your chores, then you can go outside. And I would remember coming back to the house in the afternoon on a Saturday, my dad sitting at the dining room table, and the stereo is on, and like 45s are dropping. Yeah. I mean, he had one of these huge stereos that, you could play albums, you could play 45s, and there was an 8-track player.
Oh, my God.
Too. And I just remember the Ohio players, the Isley Brothers, Earth, Wind, and Fire, Confunction, the OJs, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye. That was my upbringing. Yeah. I was in church on Sunday, and so my mom sang in the choir. So I could remember my grandmother and my mother singing Precious Lord, I Surrender All on Sundays. And then on Saturdays, it was the OJs.
How about Soul Train?
Oh, Soul Train, yes.
Did you watch Soul Train?
I was a Soul Train guy.
Yeah.
I remember American Bandstand a little bit, but I was definitely when I think of Saturday mornings as a kid, I think Fat Albert and the Gang and Soul Train.
Yeah, and then Jackson 5 had a little cartoon for a minute.
That's
for
right.
like about a year or two. It was like their cartoon.
Yeah.
Saturday mornings.
Yeah, so how in the world did you get into music and end up being the drummer on videos like My Prerogative and playing with Earth, Wind, and Fire, Lenny Kravitz? Were you dreaming about this as a little kid?
Well, first of all, I would say that the way I ended up there is it was just God's providential hand in my life, really, because I believe that I gave my heart to him really as a very young boy. And I think just ever since then, God's hand has been on my life. He knew that music would be a vehicle or tool that he would use in my life to reach and minister to people. If I was not a drummer and I didn't play with those people, there'd be a multitude of people I wouldn't have been able to reach, touch, impact, or influence. And so I think he always had like a grand master plan with all that, knowing that as I open these doors for Z, he's going to use this platform. I was never afraid of having a name or a platform because I knew I was always going to use it for God. That I was never worried about me becoming self-inflated or it was about me. I just saw it all as a vehicle in which to touch more people, because the world has plenty of people that work for the devil that are big and huge and that lead people astray all day long. So why can't God have a few people of his own that do the opposite, right? And I think also just for me being in the music business at a very young age, I realized very quickly that life without Christ is really not about anything. It's empty, it's boring, it's vain. And those people that live without God in their life, they live in such a way that none of those things really ever fulfill that empty place in their soul, because they're looking to all of the fame and the name and the money and the sex, drugs, rock and roll. They're looking to all of that to fill some kind of void, but they never do. And so because of that, I was like, that can't be like where it's at, because when you're young, you have a different paradigm, you have a different way of thinking. But I would say that I did when I was a kid, I was always a dreamer. I always dreamt of things that seemed outrageous and outlandish. I still do. And I realized that that was really just the way God wired me. He wired me like a Daniel. I'm a dreamer. So most of the things that I'm doing today, that I've been doing for a long time, are things that I dreamt about. Like I imagined them, or I'd fall asleep with the Lord, and then I would see these larger than life things. And I imagined being a drummer. I imagined being a speaker and teaching and writing. I imagined and dreamt all those things. Although at the time when I was really young, I didn't know that it was God dreaming through me.
Wow.
It was like his dream for me. And sometimes God's dreams come in our own voice. They don't come like a big megaphone like in the Ten Commandments movie where he's saying, Ephraim, I've called you to do this.
Yeah.
But you're feeling so strongly about it, and then later you realize, that's just God dreaming in me, because that's what he does. He dreams in us. He goes, Ephraim, this is the dream I have for you. But it's going to come in a recognizable form. It's going to come through inspiration. It's going to come through ideas. It's going to come through a conversation. But you're dreaming about being a pastor, and you're dreaming about the people that you're going to impact. But it's just God dreaming. So everything I do in my life is really just God dreaming in me. But I'm a very big kid. I am the one thing I've protected all of my life, and still to this moment, is sort of my childlike faith. I'll get an idea in a dream that seems impossible, but I'll believe it's possible, because I've guarded that childlike faith where I don't allow myself to. I'm growing older, but I don't allow myself to grow up in that sense that I can still believe like a child for incredible things. And what is that? That's faith, really. And to me, that's the most valuable commodity I have. It's not my drumming or teaching or speaking or writing or influence it's none of that. It's that I can believe God to do incredible things that takes him to do it. Yeah. And then I'm just like the willing, simple, childlike vessel. I mean, it could be things like, I traveled with Paul Allen, who's the co-founder of Microsoft. He's the fourth richest guy in the world, But at one time as a child, I dug my clothes out of a Goodwill drop-off box. So I went from that to traveling with on a $240 million yacht, the most expensive yacht in the world.
Some people will call that from goodwill to good God. Man,
goodwill to good God.
Good God Almighty. Yeah, some
that's people good, man. And no one's ever called that. That is that.
Yeah.
But I, actually God gave me dreams about this guy for several months before I ever met him, before I knew I'd meet him.
Yeah.
So I was having dreams about him at night, wondering, why am I dreaming about this guy? And then I began praying for him and interceding for him for several months. Wow. And then all of a sudden God brought it all together. And so I don't know, what is that? That's like what he does with Daniel. That's what he does with different people in the Bible. He gives you dreams. I guess they're prophetic dreams, or I can't control what I dream. Yeah. You know what I mean? I wish I could, because then nightmares would go away, right? But so we don't control what we dream. So I realized, well, that's just God communicating with me. Then when I wake up, I believe that it's possible. And then I'm no more talented than any other person on this earth. But the only thing I might be different than a lot of people is I've taken the things that he's given me, and I've worked really, really hard and been really, really diligent to try to turn them into something.
Yeah. First I want to back up a little bit, because what I'm fascinated about with your story is I have met artists who they were rock and roll artists. So I was fortunate. A few years ago, I spoke at a conference with Alice Cooper.
Okay, yeah.
And so I've been around these artists who, well known, and it was almost like they came to Jesus when they hit rock bottom, or they were, they were going through a storm or a turmoil or a trial as an artist, and then they came to themselves and realized they needed God. Mm-hmm. Here you came into the music industry already knowing God, already feeling like God was speaking into your life. So I'm so used to hearing these stories where artists have to crash and burn before they say yes to God, but yet you entered into this with God. So did you have to kind of be an undercover person of faith? Or were artists like, they were cool that God was so meaningful to you and when you're at the height of your career?
I've never been an undercover guy ever. from a young child, I was always extremely bold. That's just the way God wired me. In a way, I'm like, if I look at different biblical characters, the guy who one of the guys that I really identify with a lot is like Daniel. God made me kind of bold like a Daniel. But Daniel was also a secular man, and God, he was God's man in a secular society. Yeah. And I've kind of been that way. But when I was 6 years old, or maybe 5 or 6 years old, my sister reminded me. She goes, "Yeah, when you were little, I don't even remember this ever even happening, but she's 10 years older, and she would say, when you were little, you would come to me and say, 'Oh, I've been talking to Jesus.'" Like, I have no recollection of that, but I felt the presence of God at a very early age. At about 10 or 11 is when I officially gave my heart to the Lord, at a Bible summer church camp, like a Baptist summer church camp. And at 12, I wanted to be a preacher, and at 18, I wanted to be a preacher, and at 21 or whatever. The drumming was kind of started around 16, but I had a mother who had a single immigrant mother from Mexico. She had a strong faith that she imparted to me, and we struggled to live and we struggled to survive. So one of the reasons why I didn't kind of go the route of all those other people and the drinking, the drugs and all that is because I've been working since I was 6 or 7 years old, literally on the streets, doing things, selling things, surviving, making a living. So, and if there was anything that I wanted in my life, I was going to have to work to get it because my mother had 7 children with no father around. And so the idea of wasting any money on partying was something that just didn't even make logical sense to me. I was trying to save my money to pay for drum lessons, or save my money to buy a car or buy records. I was always investing, and I thought, well, why would I work so hard and then spend all this money and up my nose and then it disappears? That's not a good steward. So those things for me were I'm very methodical and pragmatic and logical. It was like common sense wisdom. I was like, I'm not going to waste. I'm trying to build something, not trying to destroy something. So I didn't have, but when people who don't know me, especially a lot of people in the church, they automatically assume what you just said, he was probably a crackhead a year ago, lost his family and home, and he probably just found Jesus. They always assume that by looking at me, and because that's probably more the common story of many people in rock. Like you said, they hit rock bottom. I guess I had a shield of protection from my mother's prayers, and also just the hardship that I saw already in my life. I mean, our life was so unstable. By the time I was in the 4th grade, we moved, close to 30 times. And many times in my red radio flyer wagon, we'd move our entire furniture to the next apartment. So life was already tough. I didn't need to do anything to make it harder. And so squandering your skills or your talents or squandering your money and the other thing is, because of my mother's love for the Lord and the joy that she had, I saw an example that you didn't need all that other stuff to be fulfilled. You just needed to have that connection to God, because everyone's trying to fill the void, right? And they're trying to fill it with all these earthly things, and no one's been successful in the history of the world. Yeah. So why would I think I'm going to be any different? Yeah. And I also wanted to break the curse, because I didn't have a father and I didn't have those things. I had a dream also. I wrote down visions and dreams for my life as a father, as a husband. I have pages of things that are my visions and dreams. And in fact, I was just recently, I grew up in Compton, California. But then later we moved to a little small town, a mountain town called Grants Pass, Oregon. So, I mean, I went from the set of Sanford and Son to the set of Little House on the Prairie. Yeah. I mean, it was that extreme. But I was recently up in Grants Pass, and I went to the county fair where in 1977 I was raising chickens, and I was going to be the world's greatest chicken farmer. I had chickens from all over the world, and I thought that's what I was going to be. So I went back to the fair where I hadn't been for 40 years, but there was a little booth that I used to work at as a 4-H club kid. And I remember I was 16 years old, and I wrote down on a little piece of orange paper while I was selling corn dogs, I wrote down some visions and dreams for my life. And on it, I just had barely started, or I might have not even started playing the drums, but I wrote down, I want to make it as a drummer in show business. I want to be married and be with my wife forever. I wrote down 5 things on this little orange piece of paper, and no one had taught me about decreeing and declarations or anything like that. It was just, I still have the piece of paper. Wow. I still saved it. And so God just put those sort of desires in me. and that's kind of why I'm excited tonight to speak at the Big Wednesday thing, because I'm sharing on the power of words.
Yeah.
And those, and I'm now, when I was there the other day, I was sitting at that same booth. The booth has not changed in 40 years, and there's a couple little girls there working and selling stuff, and I just start to talk to them. I don't know who they are. They don't know who I am, and I just start talking about, what do you got? You graduated high school, so what's your plan? What's your dream, or whatever? And I start kind of teaching them how to. I said, I wrote down some things here years ago that I didn't tell them what I did or who I am or anything, but I just said I was able to accomplish these things, but you need to write down some of the things, write down some of your ideas and dreams. And I gave them a quote from Henry Ford, and Henry Ford had a quote, and he said, thinking is really, really hard work, which explains why so few people engage in it.
Wow.
Because the hardest part of a dream, the hardest part of anything is the vision part. Like once a blueprint is written for a skyscraper, it can come together really fast with all the building, right? But if you don't, the hard work is in thinking about the blueprint, about the plan, about what you're going to do. And God is a God of planning. God is a God who's strategic about everything he does. So I think his spirit was just wrapped around me since a young age. He protected me from many things, but he also knew that he could trust me with the advancement of platform, the advancement of access to people, because back to what you're saying, I've always been bold. I've never been afraid to share the Lord with anybody. And on all those tours, I didn't party with those guys, but I never judged them for doing what they did, so that I could be around them. I could be on the bus with them. I'm laughing and having a good time, and they'd always say, well, what are you on? I'm saying, I'm not on nothing, man. I just feel good. Yeah. And they would, but the key was I shared my faith. I walked my faith out in front of them, but I never shunned them. I never acted like I'm too holy or pious or religious to hang out with you.
Yeah.
And so and then many years later, they would come to me and, man, you were always solid. I need to talk to you about my life or my marriage. And I led many, many people to the Lord. I would use backstage, like when people want to meet me, drummer, whoever. I traveled with a whole bunch of books and Bibles. I had Lenny Kravitz buy me like 1,000 or 10,000 Bibles once, just with the words "Let Love Rule" written on it. And I said, buy them for me, and I'm going to give them out one by one. And I gave them all out one by one over a period of years.
What was his response when you asked him to buy 1,000 Bibles?
He was down with it because Lenny is a believer, and so we were both believers. The Lord used me to really fire him up or reignite his faith some years ago, where, he was a believer, but he was kind of drifting or living in the world. And then the Lord brought me back to him to kind of re-inspire him to get back in the game. And then he did. And then he started helping me do what I wanted to do by making use of that platform. So I had like 1,000, but I would travel in the bay of the bus with big suitcases of books and Bibles to give out. So after a show, people would want to meet me by the side of the bus. In 5 minutes, I could evangelize and immediately turn any conversation without being religious, without being overbearing, but just sharing the love of God.
So you truly have lived as a missionary in the music industry.
Yeah.
And what people forget, it has grieved my heart that especially in American Christianity, especially the evangelical segment of it, because I'm a product of both the black church and the evangelical church, that sometimes I go, if we would only use in our own nation some of the same principles we would use as a missionary
somewhere else
if we went to another country.
Yeah.
And again, if you're going as a missionary and not a colonizer, then what you're going to do is you're going to learn the culture of the indigenous people. You're going to figure out ways to honor that culture, to honor that nation, that people group you're in, and then through the honoring and the understanding and the respect and the navigating of that culture, you're able to present Jesus. You're able to present the love of God. You're able to present an invitation into eternity. And so, but in our own nation, we don't use those principles. We think, well, if we judge people and tell them they're going to hell and shame them and tell them how sinful they are and how far away from God and how they're not living out God's word, then maybe I can get them to confess and finally put their hands up and say, you got me. I'm a sinner. I'm so bad. But here you are in the music industry, a highly respected artist in your own right. And you're not there fire and brimstone. You're there using the platform and the relational credibility to present the good news of Jesus. And it seems like you're living out something that this is what everyday, ordinary Christians are supposed to be about. Whether you're a drummer, or if you're working at UPS,
or a plumber,
or you're a plumber, or you're working at Popeyes, or you're a lawyer, or you're a doctor, a teacher in a public school, a student at a university, the same principles you're using as an artist on your platform, we're supposed to use whatever the platform is.
I'm a super simple person. And to me, the gospel is simple, and all of these things are really simple. What helps me is I came to a place a long time ago where I don't care what people think of me. There's been so many people in my career, in my ministry. I've been ministering for 40 years around the world and in every place imaginable. But I've been misjudged, misperceived by so many religious people because they don't. The way I look doesn't appeal to them, or they think of it as worldly, or because, just because I dress a certain way doesn't have anything to do with what's in my soul or my heart or my spirit. Yeah. King David dressed exuberantly and beautifully and all that in the Bible, but his heart, but people have misjudged me, misperceived me. But I just, I'm only worried about pleasing him. And I have found that in my own life, by being an evangelist, by being a teacher, by being a preacher, that I've always just walked in love, and I don't concern myself with what other people think or what they don't think, because that frees you so much. If you're just worried about, hey, and I have seen God move all kinds of things and open up all kinds of doors that only he could do, because I always put him first, and I didn't care, gee, what are people going to think I'm talking to this guy about the Lord or whatever. I didn't worry about what they think. But I never shared the gospel in anything with condemnation. I've always shared it in love. But first, I develop a relationship with people. Now, there are people that you're just going to meet for 5 minutes, and that's different. And there are people that you're going to travel with or work with day to day. But so every scenario is different. But the one thing that I can say that people will feel from me at every stage, whether they meet me for 5 minutes, 30 seconds, or they spend 10 years with me, is they're going to feel my love first. Because when they feel that love, that's my Jesus coming through me. And they never feel my judgment. I'm not saying, I never condone anybody's sin or even my own sin, but they're not ever feeling my judgment. And because of that, there's been the Lord has helped me to lead many, many people to him with just that simple tactic of love. And then I'm sharing with them my enthusiasm for this God that loves me and what he's done in my life. And it's like I discovered the cure for cancer, and I just want you to get cured too. And that's what the feeling it's like. And then when I've led people to the Lord in trains, planes, buses, automobiles. I've been on tour where I would meet people on an airplane, spend 5 hours talking to them about God. Then I would say, give me your name and address, and they live in Denmark or whatever. A month later, they'd get a package from me. It'd be like a $250 package, a Bible, a $100 Bible, a bunch of books, time to go down to the post office to fill out the stupid form and stand in line, and then it's $100 to send it. But every time I said, you'll hear from me, they would be blown away, because they'd go, wow, this guy. And I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back. I'm telling you, that's how I roll. And what that does for that person is go, I mattered so much to this guy that he went out of his way to do that. I want to impact them with that kind of love. Now, I'm not sharing this for people to go, oh, look how awesome Zoro is. I've done a million things that are invisible that nobody's ever going to see. I do them for the Lord, and I do them for the sake of other people. But as someone who's a leader, I try to lead by example. And I say, this is where I'm going. This is what I'm doing. I post things all the time on all my social media, not to be braggadocious, not to be whatever, but to lead. This is what I'm doing. And in doing that, I have found many people. Billy Graham had a quote. He said, when one man steps out in courage, he helps to stiffen the spines of others. So when I see Ephraim going and doing things that take boldness and courageous, all of a sudden I feel like I could get a spine. You don't ever have to say it. If I just see you do it, all of a sudden I feel like maybe I should be doing that. I'm a Christian, or I could be doing that. You know what I mean? We lead by example. And those who want to judge you, whatever, that's their deal. But I'm doing it for the Lord, and I'm going to lead because I am a leader, and that's the way God made me. And so but it's all very simple. You just walk in love. The other thing is I'm ruled by eternity. If we ponder on eternity, then we're going to live differently in the present. So I'm always thinking about like today in light of eternity, like I have a chance to impact some people, to make a difference. If I make a difference in one kid's life or help him to become a better father, I could be changing multiple generations of the future. Because if one guy becomes a good father who never was or didn't have a good one, then he's changing the DNA, so that he could be the patriarch of a new generation. So, and I see every assignment as equal. I see it as just as important as, all the big superstars I've ministered to or hung out with, as people that nobody's ever going to know, that I've met on planes, trains, automobiles, walking down the street. They're all equal to me. Nobody's more important than the other. And the only thing I wish I could do is multiply myself, because I'm only one person. So sometimes you get so many people that are needing or wanting something of you, and I'm only one guy. I can only be in one place at one time, and I can only I only have so much bandwidth in my lifetime, which is why I try to do podcasts or writing books or speaking or things that can multiply what I've learned, or multiply my sentiments, or multiply my heart, because you and I are only going to have so many one-on-one encounters with people.
Yeah. Let's do this. This has been so good, but I would be remiss if I didn't wind down by having a little soul.
If we didn't end,
music
you'd be remiss if we didn't end the podcast.
We got to have a little soul music talk.
Oh yeah.
Before we close.
Yeah.
So with this podcast called City Beats.
Yeah.
Soul music is the sound of the city.
That's the sound of my heart.
Motown is Detroit.
Oh, yeah.
The Philadelphia sound.
Yeah.
Do I need to say more? Teddy Pendergrass, the OJs.
The Memphis sound.
The Memphis sound, Stax Records, Isaac Hayes.
All of it.
Oh, my gosh. The Minneapolis sound.
The Minneapolis sound.
Prince,
the 80s,
The Time.
Yeah.
I think of soul music, and I think of the city. I think of the urban sound. And I think it's because, to me, the best of soul music, of course, it's love songs. So, I was that kid that had a boombox.
Yeah.
And when Denisha and I were going out in high school, I would talk to her on the phone. And then, Love's Holiday would come on by Earth, Wind, and Fire.
That's the best.
And I put the phone by the boombox. I'd be like, hold on just a second.
Yeah.
I was that dude, just hold on just a second. I put the phone by the boombox. So soul music is love music.
Yeah.
But soul music also is a commentary on what's going on. When I think of soul music, I think of Marvin Gaye.
What's going on?
What's going on? I think of You Haven't Done Nothing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
By Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
Higher Ground. Living Just Enough for the City.
Curtis Mayfield. All of his
oh
stuff.
my gosh. So what is it that R&B artists today have forgotten about soul music, about
the bigger part of that? It's always a carrier of messages. All the greatest soul music that really hits our heart the most is carrying a message that resonates. Like, that's why I always loved the music of all those guys. But like Earth, Wind, and Fire was not just a funky band. Their music always had deep messages about life and God and spiritual things and what was going on in the world and politics and in the country. So I think, first of all, music is sending some kind of message. And the things that really touch us the most sometimes are the simplest things, right? Like, take Stevie Wonder. Like, how many times have we called somebody? On the way here, I called 3 or 4 people to tell them that I love them, on the way to this thing.
Yeah.
I called an old drummer, is 79 years old, named Gene Chrisman. He played with Elvis and Dusty Springfield. He played on, the song that was in, all the great Dusty Springfield stuff. Son of a Preacher Man. He played on Elvis' Suspicious Minds. Anyway, I just called him and tell him that I loved him, man. I said, man, I just want you to know that I love you, and I loved your work, and I love your heart, or whatever. And I just called to tell you I love you, right? So Stevie Wonder writes a song with the most simple lyric in the world. I just called to say I love you. Yeah. But it resonates with us because a great writer of soul music captures the way we all feel, but we've been unable to say it. Yeah. And they put it in a song, and it could be a love song or it could be a political song, but it resonates with us because it's sending us some kind of a message that's common to our hearts.
It's good.
And that's what's missing. The other part is a really high level of respect for the art form of musicianship, because I think that's kind of a dying art of people that really know how to study their craft, or really know how to write a lyric, and really know how to arrange horns. And, guys like Quincy Jones who knew how to write music. I mean, today a lot of people are just winging it and just using computers to do whatever, but they haven't really learned the craft of playing, the craft of songwriting, the craft of lyrics, and all of those things are a high-level skill. And I just think there's a whole young generation that is only tapping like 1/100th of their potential, but nothing that's great ever comes by accident. God gives us the gift that we have in a seed form, right? It comes in the form of a seed, but we got to nurture it. We've got to put the plastic over the crop. We've got to beat the birds of the air off of it that are trying to attack it. We've got to work the soil. We've got to work the land to turn it into something, but the seed has the potential to be a huge oak tree. But if you don't do anything, it's just going to be like a little miniature.
See, that's such a good word. We're going to end on that, because that's an amen, Selah
That's oh my God.
So we're gonna have to do this again.
Yeah,
Since we don't live that far from each other.
Yeah.
And we work on staff together at the same church.
We ought to be able to pull this off.
We ought to be able to do this again. So hey, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, that was just rich. Zoro, not only a phenomenal drummer, in my estimation, and in the estimation of a lot of people around the world, one of the best drummers you'll ever hear in your life. But more important than that, there's something that means more than his drumming, and that is being used by God to bring the good news to the lost, the broken, and the hurting, that they might be found, blessed, and helped, and pushed towards eternity. So I'm so grateful for your platform, and I'm so grateful for your humble heart. Love you, bro.
I'm grateful for you, man, and for what you're doing, and thank you for inviting me. And the last thing I would tell anybody is, like, all of our days, every single person who's watching this, all of our days are numbered. We have a limited amount of life. We just don't know when the end is. So all of our days are numbered. If you start thinking about that and go, you know what? My days are numbered, but my good deeds are not. The final count is left up to me. How much I use of my life for the Lord, it's going to expire. There's an expiration date on Efrem and Zoro. We will expire. I just want to get as much done as I can to advance God, his kingdom, his people, and be a blessing as humanly possible within the bandwidth that I have. And since none of us know when our last day is, today is the day to make a difference. Today is the day to be bold. If you knew you were going to die next week, what would you do differently? You would start getting after it, and pretty soon you wouldn't care about what anybody thought. You got a week left, right? That's the way you should live every day. Live each day as if it were your last, and then one day it'll be true.
Okay, we would drop the mics, but my budget is limited. So I got a limited budget, so we're not going to drop the mics because I need them next week. But hey, keep paying attention to City Beats, and I believe you're going to be blessed. God bless.
God bless.